If you're deciding between a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K or the Nikon Z6, there are some things that you should know. Check this out. What's up guys, Myung here from Prodigy Studios. Now let's start off with the fact that if you are looking to do both photos and video, then you have to get yourself the Nikon Z6. It's one of the best photo cameras, and now it's one of the best video cameras that's out there right now. So clearly that's the winner. The Blackmagic 4K does take photos, but it's really not meant for photography. You do have to push the back button to focus first, and then push this little button that has the camera icon to take a photo. It doesn't make any kind of shutter sound effects, but you will see a red blinking light to tell you that you took a photo. It takes an 8 megapixel DNG photo, so it's not that bad. I mean, if you're comparing it to your phone photo, it's definitely a lot better. So, but it's really not meant for photography. So if you need to do both, get yourself the Z6. All right guys, so let's start off with the sensor size. The Nikon Z6 has a full frame sensor. And one of the things that's so great about having a full frame sensor is the shallow depth of field that you can easily get, and also the amazing bokeh that you can get from it as well. I use a lot of prime lenses. I use my 70 to 200 lens, and just the image is so good. It's so nice. So that's the big benefit of having a full sensor camera. The Blackmagic 4K is only a micro four thirds sensor, but even though I said only, it actually has a lot of great benefits of being a micro four thirds sensor. First off, you don't get the shallow depth of field and the bokeh that the Z6 has, but you can get close to it by getting a speed booster and then using your Nikon, Canon, or any other lenses that's out there. That's one thing great about the micro four thirds system. You could use almost every lens that's out there. I won't go that far, but there's so many to pick from. And so you could have fun with that. But the downfall is that, of course, if you use the speed booster and Nikon lens and so on, you lose the autofocus. I think the Canon lenses you could still get the autofocus with Canon lenses, but with the Nikon lens, you definitely don't have that functionality. So in comparison, a micro four thirds 2.8 lens is more like a full frame aperture 4 lens to get the similar shallow depth of field and the bokeh. So because the Z6 has an amazing ability to get that shallow depth of field, but because the Blackmagic has an ability to use so many different lenses, I'll consider that a tie. So the main reason why you would pick between these two cameras, the Blackmagic 4K and the Nikon Z6, is that they both shoot in ProRes and in RAW. The Blackmagic is all internal. You get different quality of ProRes, from high quality to proxy, and you also get B-RAW. The Nikon Z6, you do have to get yourself an Adamas Ninja or any other external recorder that unlocks that ProRes feature. And when you do use the Ninja 5, it also unlocks the log feature as well. Without it, you can't shoot ProRes and you can't shoot in log. The video codec that it has is MOV and MP4. It's low bit rate, but at least it saves a lot of space when you're recording for a long time. And one of the reasons why you would want to use a ProRes file is because of the fact that it's a 10-bit 422. So it's super high quality video. If you were to shoot a sunset or a sky, then the gradient becomes super smooth because of all the colors that you get from a ProRes file. You will see in an 8-bit video, like if you were to color correct some of those sunsets, then it starts making weird artifacts and sometimes you lose a lot of highlight. It gets a little messy if you try to color correct an 8-bit video file. But with ProRes, it's more forgiving. So you get to do a lot more color grading and you get more professional video. Also to mention is that if you are using an Apple computer like I am, then a ProRes file, even though the file size is huge, it runs super smooth in your Apple computer. I mean, for example, if I use a GoPro MP4 video file and I got 3 GoPro that I'm trying to do multi-camera with, My 2015 iMac would start stuttering. The previews wouldn't work as great, but mess around with the ProRes video, even though has such a big file size, it runs like butter. So it's one of the benefits of using a ProRes video. Also, one of the great things about these two cameras is that it has one of the best ISO functionality. The Blackmagic has an interesting ISO. It's got a dual native ISO technology. So at 400, it's at its best. And then at 1250, the second one kicks in, and then it's at its best as well. I think also at 3800, around there, according to Blackmagic, is the best ISO that you could get into. Because if you were to increase it from 400 to 800 to 1000, you're gonna start seeing a lot of grain and a little bit of discoloration. And then once you kick into 1250, all the grain goes away and it looks super smooth. But the interesting thing about it is that you lose some highlights. So if you look at this video of the candle, in the middle, the highlight kind of just completely goes away and it just becomes white. Just be cautious of what ISO you're in when you are shooting with a Blackmagic. I would use up to 5000 for ISO. So that's pretty amazing compared to the GH5 that I'm used to, which I would probably stick below 1600 for ISO, just to make sure that it's not too grainy. So it's been really fun being able to play around with a high ISO for my shots. Now the Nikon Z6 ISO, it's one of the best ISO I've ever seen in my life. And I've been shooting for like over 15 years, playing with just 800 ISO, 1000 ISO. That's what I'm used to. But now with this camera, I could go all the way up to 20,000 and the video looks amazing. It's so usable. And that's kind of crazy, isn't it? But because I mean, when you shoot, you normally want to shoot on how the realistic of the lighting of your scene is. You don't really want to shoot a room like this and all of a sudden bump up your ISO to 20,000 and it just artificially looks crazy bright. But if you're like me and we shoot a lot of weddings and events in dark places like the reception, the hotel room, and sometimes getting the bride or the groom's face to be shown more clear is more important than the lighting of your setting. So it does help out a lot, especially like at receptions. I mean, when people are dancing and you don't want to bust out a bunch of lights to light your scene because then that'll ruin the mood. But it's so cool to have a camera that you can use all the way up to 20,000. And as you increase, you don't see any kind of fluctuation of highlights and shadows like you do with a Blackmagic. So it's really nice that it's very controlled. So let's talk about battery life. I mean, everybody knows that the Blackmagic battery sucks. It lasts about 15 minutes and sometimes it just completely shuts down without even giving you a warning. But so we all have to use an external battery. A lot of the people out there, they spend a lot of money getting those big V-mount batteries. I've actually never used it myself just because I'm cheap and it's kind of big and I like to be more mobile. So what I do is I get this cheap $25 NP batteries. And if you're buying NP batteries for your lights and you're spending a lot of money on it, get yourself this $25 one because you get a button that shows the strength of your battery life and you get a USB port that charges your phones and LED lights and whatever other gadgets that you have. And it's got a DC input. So then what I do is I use this battery with this cable, plug it in, plug this to the AC part of your Blackmagic, and you get about 2 hours of battery life. So there's a lot of people out there that talks about, oh, when you get a Blackmagic 4K, you gotta spend so much money rigging it so it's ready to shoot, but that's not the case. Just get yourself the camera, a lens, of course, this cheap battery. I have this little gadget here that holds the battery and then I just attach it to the top. And get yourself a fast memory card and you're good to go. So realistically, it's really not that expensive to get going with your Blackmagic. So I love this camera. The Nikon Z6 battery is pretty decent. For a whole 6-hour wedding day, I'll probably use 3 to 4 batteries. So it's not that bad. So when it comes to batteries, I would say it's a tie again because the Nikon Z6 battery is good, but the Blackmagic allows you to use different batteries out there and they're making it really cheap nowadays. So they're both good to go. So small thing to mention is the rear monitor. The Nikon Z6 can't flip facing forward. So if you're making yourself a video like this, you need to use an external monitor so you could see what you're doing, to get a selfie and things like that. But it still allows you to flip downward and upward. So when you're shooting, you could kind of comfortably hold it by your chest, look down at your shots and look at your subject that you're shooting. Whereas the Blackmagic, it's kind of stuck back there. It doesn't tilt at all. And it's kind of uncomfortable to shoot facing right in front of your face. Nobody really shoots this way. And then, you have to kind of look at what you're shooting. It's kind of very uncomfortable and it gets tiring holding the camera, right? Just this high for too long. So I always use an external monitor so I could also comfortably hold it down here, keep it stable and get my shots. But the pro about this monitor is that it's massive. You could see if your subject is in focus or not. So because of that, because this thing tilts a little bit and it's good quality, and this monitor is big, it's kind of a tie too. Another quick note, the Z6 is weatherproof. So if you have a lens that's also weatherproof and it starts to rain, you don't have to worry too much about getting your camera damaged. But your Blackmagic is not weatherproof, so you definitely need to cover it if you get rained on. Let's talk about the autofocus. Blackmagic doesn't have full autofocus. It has an ability to focus with a back button, and then you could record. It's not 100% manual. You could still put it on a tripod, focus on your subject and record, and it's kind of easy to do. But if you need to rack focus or if you're constantly moving around, then I highly recommend using an external monitor so that you could comfortably focus on your subject easily. Of course, you could also rely on the monitor in the back as well. Nikon Z6 has one of the best autofocus I have ever played with. It has an ability to focus on a person's eye, their face, and if there's a group of them, it focuses on a random person, but you could easily change the face selection by pushing the joystick left and right. And now it could focus on your dogs and your cats. And I have dogs too, so it's really cool that it could finally focus on their face and recognize that. Just a quick mention about that autofocus is that Nikon Z6 is so good at focusing, like especially the important part for me during a wedding, for example, is when the bride is walking down. Her face just needs to be in focus the whole time. And before this camera, it was kind of tough to get that in focus manual, right? Because they're moving and you have to manually turn it at the right time. But now it'll lock in on her face, and as she walks towards you, it'll continually keep her in focus. And if by chance it's not locking on her face, because sometimes technology isn't perfect, you could just tap on her face and then it'll track whatever you tap on and then just follow that autofocus track. So this camera has a lot of cool focus features. So it's really neat. So when it comes to focus, the Z6 is the winner. All right, let's talk about the stabilization. The Blackmagic doesn't have an internal stabilization, so you gotta use a lens that has one, right? And it has to be a native lens. It can't be a speed booster with a Nikon lens that's got the VR. That doesn't work. It has to be a micro four thirds native lens. So I have Lumix for my GH5 lenses that has OIS, optical image stabilizer, and it does a decent job getting rid of your micro jitters, those little jitters shake that you get with your hands if you get tired holding it. But it's not good enough to be holding it the whole time. Stabilization isn't that great. So I usually have this camera on a tripod, on a shoulder mount, or just kind of put a bunch of rig parts on it so it's heavy. So when you hold it, it becomes more stable because of the weight. The Nikon Z6 stabilization is one of the best I have ever played with. Now, I always talk about my GH5 because that's one of my favorite cameras that I've used ever since it came out, right? And still is. And the GH5 has the best stabilization according to a lot of people out there. And the Nikon Z6, it's just right behind it, or if not equal to it. So the stabilization that you turn on inside the camera acts like a tripod. It acts like a lock. So it's not meant for you to move around, get like a gimbal kind of shot, because it'll kind of warp the videos. But if you just keep it steady and don't move around, then it does an amazing job just standing still, just staying still, especially with your 70 to 200 long lens. And if you need to move around, get like a little sliding shot or just kind of a little movement, then you could turn the internal stabilization off and turn on your VR from your Nikon lens. And it does a decent job too. It's slightly better than, Baba needs to make my video, Baba. Okay, so when it comes to stabilization, the Z6 is the winner. All right, let's talk about price. The Blackmagic starts off at $1,300, and you could spend extra to get yourself a SSD drive, which I highly recommend because that's what you need to record in 4K, raw, high quality ProRes. Otherwise, if you can find yourself a super fast SD card or a CF fast card, then you can use that as well. But an SSD drive is a lot cheaper, smaller. I got a little adapter here that holds onto it. So $100 would get you like a terabyte of SSD. So, why not? And then you could just plug that SSD right to your computer and start editing just right from it. So that's kind of cool. I'd say, $1,300, cages and some clamps and stuff, maybe an additional $200, batteries, maybe $100. So maybe about $1,700, you get yourself a fully set up Blackmagic 4K that's ready to go. Compared to the Nikon Z6, it's always in some kind of weird sale, right? So I got the camera at $1,700, and it came with an FTZ lens adapter that allows you to use all your older Nikon lenses. The regular price is $2,000 for both of them. So with the Nikon Z6, it gets a little pricey. You get the Z6 and the FTZ mount at $2,000. Sometimes it's on sale together. And then you get yourself a cage if you want to. And the Adamus, that's about $800 plus the SSD drive, another $100. Maybe another cage for your Ninja 5. And then you get yourself this memory card, XQD memory card. And it's kind of pricey too. It's like in the hundreds. $200, $300, but they said it's a better technology, so that's cool. And quick mention, it doesn't have dual slots. It's only got one slot, so you can't back up your videos or photos. So that's a bummer. But adding all that up together, it comes up to past $3,000. So it does get a little pricey. The Blackmagic Cinema Camera 4K and the Nikon Z6 are both amazing cameras at 2020. If you do both photo and video, get yourself the Z6. But if you are strictly a videographer, then honestly, you can't go wrong with either, right? If I had to pick one and I'm only doing video, I actually would pick the Blackmagic because I just really love the color science. It's closer to your camera, red camera, RE camera, which is over $100,000, right? And it's great to have that feature finally. When all my shooting life, I wanted a camera that's closest to Hollywood, and the Blackmagic 4K at $1,300 gives you that quality, and it gives you raw video. That's crazy for that price. The Nikon Z6, you do have to pay an extra $200, send it to Nikon to unlock the raw ProRes feature. Plus, you have to get yourself the Ninja 5 or other external recorders to shoot RAW. I haven't done that yet. I will soon. But as of now, it's still kind of new, so I'm just waiting around for a little bit. Or until I really need to shoot in RAW. So, babe, I'm almost done. Okay, babe. Babe, please, I'm almost done. Close the door for me. All right, guys, so the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 4K and the Nikon Z6 are both amazing cameras. They both take amazing videos, and you really can't go wrong with either way. If you are trying to save some money, then get yourself the Blackmagic. If you need to do both photo and video, get yourself the Z6. And if I was strictly a videographer, I actually would prefer getting the Blackmagic because of the ability to use all kinds of different lenses. It's a lot cheaper. It shoots in RAW internally. And what I really love about the Blackmagic is the color science, the skin tone, the way everything looks. It just looks like a movie. 15 years of shooting, and I've always wanted a video camera that shoots close to an ARRI camera or the RED camera. But I obviously can't afford that, right? So I got myself a Blackmagic, and it is very close to it. So I love this camera. I mean, it's harder to use because it's a video camera, right? And everything is very manual, but it's worth it. It's worth it for sure. So if you guys watched the whole video, I really appreciate it. Please subscribe, and thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Baba! You're always bothering me, Baba.